My name is Hannah Brooks, and for most of my life, people described me with one word. Reliable? It sounded like a compliment. For years, I believed it was. Then one quiet Friday evening, my mother slid an elegant silver fountain pen across the dining table, the same pen she used every Christmas to sign every card she mailed to friends, neighbors, and distant relatives. It glided over the polished wood until it rested against my dinner plate. The room fell silent. My father stared into his coffee instead of looking at me. My younger sister, Lily, smiled nervously, twisting the sparkling engagement ring on her finger. Three men in dark business suits sat along one side of the table with leather, briefcases open neatly in front of them. They looked polished, confident, and completely unfamiliar. My mother folded her hands together and smiled as if she were offering dessert instead of demanding something that would change my life forever. "Hannah," she said softly, "all you have to do is sign." I looked down at the pen. I didn't move, not because I was shocked, because for the first time in 35 years, I finally understood exactly what that pen represented. It wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about helping family. It wasn't even about money. It was about ownership. For decades, my family believed they owned my kindness. That dinner was supposed to make it official. But before I explain why I left that pen exactly where it was, you need to know how I became the daughter who never learned to say no. People who meet me today usually think I've always lived a peaceful life. My office sits above a cozy bookstore in the little town of Willow Creek, Indiana. Every morning begins almost exactly the same. I unlock the glass door at 8 o'clock. The smell of fresh coffee drifts through the hallway. The old clock on the wall ticks loudly enough to hear between phone calls. Sunlight spills through the front windows onto rows of organized client files. Everything has a place. Everything balances. That's probably why accounting suited me. Numbers don't play favorites. 2 plus 2 equals 4 whether someone is rich or poor. Spreadsheets don't manipulate you. Receipts don't guilt trip you. Ledgers don't cry when you refuse to fix their mistakes. Human beings sometimes do. My husband, Nathan Carter, says I organize everything because I grew up surrounded by chaos. He's right. Growing up in my parents' house was like living beside the ocean. You never knew when the next wave would hit. Sometimes everything stayed calm for weeks. Other times, one unexpected bill, one broken appliance, or one bad decision sent everyone scrambling. And somehow, even as a child, I always ended up holding the bucket. My earliest memory of money isn't receiving an allowance. It's watching my mother cry over an overdue electric bill. I couldn't have been older than 10. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Dad sat silently with both elbows resting on the table. Mom held the unopened envelope, as though looking at it long enough might somehow change the number printed inside. Neither of them noticed I was standing in the hallway. Children notice more than adults realize, especially quiet children. That evening, I asked Mom why she looked sad. She smiled immediately. "Oh, sweetheart, grown-up problems." "What kind?" She brushed my hair behind my ear. "The kind loving families solve together?" I didn't understand what she meant. Not then, but those words quietly settled somewhere deep inside me. Families solve problems together. It sounded beautiful. Years later, I discovered something important. In our house, together almost always meant one person carried everyone else. By the time I turned 15, Dad's small roofing company was barely surviving. Jobs became harder to find. Customers paid late. Equipment broke constantly. Mom picked up extra shifts at the local library. But every paycheck disappeared before the month ended. One afternoon, I came home from school and found another bright red envelope lying on the kitchen counter. Final notice. Even from across the room, I recognized those words. Mom sat with both hands covering her face. Dad paced back and forth without speaking. Lily, only 7 years old then, sat on the living room carpet happily coloring pictures of butterflies. She had no idea anything was wrong. I had just received my paycheck from the grocery store where I bagged groceries every Saturday. I'd been saving every dollar for the school's spring trip to Washington, D.C. I'd dreamed about seeing the Lincoln Memorial, the museums, the White House. $243. Every penny I'd earned. I walked upstairs. opened the little metal box where I kept my savings, counted every bill one last time. Then I carried the envelope downstairs. I placed it gently in front of Mom. "I don't really need the trip." She stared at me. "What is this? My savings?" "Hannah!" "You can use it." For several seconds, she simply looked at me. Then she hugged me tighter than she ever had before. She cried into my shoulder. "You saved us." Those 3 words changed my life. You saved us. No teenager should hear that sentence, because children aren't built to carry adults. But something happened inside me that afternoon. I associated sacrifice with love. Helping became my identity. If fixing problems earned hugs, then maybe fixing problems was how you kept people close. Years passed. High school became college. Dad eventually closed the roofing business. Mom called it bad luck. Dad called it the economy. Neither one ever admitted poor decisions played a role. Instead, life simply became one emergency after another. Car repairs, medical bills, late mortgage payments, unexpected insurance deductibles. Every crisis somehow found its way to me. Not immediately. At first, it came wrapped in apologies. "Honey, we're embarrassed to ask." Then, "We'll pay you back next month." Eventually, "You understand how hard things have been." Finally, they stopped explaining altogether. They simply assumed I would help. And almost every time, I did. Looking back now, I don't think they planned it. Nobody wakes up deciding to depend completely on one child. It happens gradually. One favor, then another, until dependence feels normal. The strange part wasn't that they asked. The strange part was how guilty I felt whenever I considered saying no. Even thinking the word made me feel selfish. Nathan once asked me something I'll never forget. "When was the first time you remember choosing yourself?" I laughed. "I don't think I ever did." He wasn't smiling. "I think that's the saddest answer you've ever given me." I met Nathan completely by accident. Or maybe exactly when I needed him. It happened during tax season, the busiest month of every year. He walked into my office carrying a cardboard box full of receipts held together by rubber bands. "I think," he said with an embarrassed grin, "I've made your job much harder than it should be." Inside the box were restaurant receipts, business expenses, mileage logs scribbled on napkins, and enough paperwork to frighten any accountant. I laughed. "I've seen worse." "You say that now. I'll probably say it tomorrow too." He smiled. That smile stayed with me long after he left. Nathan wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He didn't try to impress anyone. He simply listened. Really listened. When we talked, I never felt interrupted. Never felt judged. Never felt like I had to earn kindness. That alone felt unfamiliar. Over the next year, we became friends. Then partners. Then quietly, deeply in love. One evening, while walking beside the river downtown, he asked something nobody had ever asked me before. "What makes you happy?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I honestly didn't know. I'd spent so many years solving everyone else's problems. I'd forgotten I was allowed to have my own dreams. Nathan squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to answer tonight. But someday, I hope you will." When he proposed 6 months later, there wasn't a fancy restaurant. No photographers hiding nearby. No orchestra. We were sitting on the porch, after dinner watching fireflies dance. Across the backyard, he reached into his pocket, held out a simple ring. "Hannah Brooks. I don't want someone who takes care of me. I want someone I get to take care of too." Tears filled my eyes immediately, because nobody had ever offered me partnership. Only responsibility. I whispered yes before he even finished asking. We married quietly at the county courthouse a few months later. 2 witnesses. A smiling judge. Cheeseburgers afterward. Apple pie for dessert. It remains the happiest day of my life. Not because it was extravagant. Because it wasn't. No expectations. No performances. No one calculating who paid for what. Just love. Simple. Honest. Real. We decided not to tell my parents immediately. Not because we were ashamed. Because experience had taught me exactly what would happen. Mom would ask Nathan about his income. Dad would evaluate his career. Lily would compare him to wealthier men she'd dated. Someone would eventually wonder whether we planned to combine finances. Not because they cared, because they were already doing the math. Nathan understood. If you're not ready, he said, we wait. That was all. No pressure. No resentment. Just patience. Patience feels a lot like love when you've spent your life around conditions. 2 years passed peacefully. Business grew steadily. Nathan's legal practice expanded. We bought a modest little house with a white porch swing. Every Sunday morning we made pancakes together. Every Friday night we watched old movies. For the first time, life felt wonderfully ordinary. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice. I always did. Nathan looked over from the stove. He didn't ask who it was. He already knew. I answered. Hannah, Mom said brightly. I've got wonderful news. I parked outside my office instead of driving home. For several minutes, I just sat behind the steering wheel, staring through the windshield while traffic drifted past. The photographs on my phone felt heavier than paper ever should. Every image was another reminder that my parents hadn't simply hoped I would help them. They had already decided I belonged to them. The loan application carried my full legal name, my old apartment address, my social security number, everything except my signature. That empty line wasn't an oversight. It was the entire plan. The wedding wasn't about celebrating Lily. It was about creating the perfect emotional trap where everyone would expect me to sign whatever was placed in front of me. I finally stepped out of the car and unlocked my bookkeeping office. The familiar smell of printer toner, coffee, and old paper usually calmed me. Today it only reminded me that numbers never lied. People did. I spread every photograph across my desk, enlarging each one until individual pen strokes became visible. The handwriting belonged to my father. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. I'd watched him fill out tax forms for decades. I'd corrected his spelling. I'd balanced his ledgers. I knew every crooked letter he wrote. The realization hit me harder than I expected. He hadn't just written my information. He'd copied it carefully, patiently, like someone preparing a legal document. There was planning behind this. Months of it. Maybe longer? My office door opened quietly. Ryan stepped inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. I figured you weren't coming home, he said softly. You know me too well. I married an accountant. He placed 1 cup beside me before sitting across the desk. He didn't ask what I found. He waited. I appreciated that. Most people ask questions before you're ready. Ryan always gave silence room to breathe. I turned my phone toward him. He studied every photograph without interrupting. His expression barely changed. That calmness was one of the reasons I'd fallen in love with him. When he finally looked up, he removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. This isn't about money anymore. I know. This is identity fraud. Hearing someone else say it made everything suddenly feel real. Not family drama. Not manipulation. Fraud. A crime. My father hadn't crossed an emotional boundary. He'd crossed a legal one. Ryan pulled a yellow legal pad toward himself. We start documenting everything. Every conversation. Every text. Every phone call. Every request for money. Every date. Every witness. Every suspicious event. He wrote headings with the neat handwriting. I'd watched Phil hundreds of legal documents. Timeline. Evidence. Witnesses. Financial history. Potential motive. I watched him organize chaos into structure. It reminded me of what bookkeeping had always done for me. When life became confusing, numbers restored order. Law did the same thing for Ryan. Different profession. Same comfort. I froze my credit this morning. He nodded approvingly. Good. I called before I knew about the application. Even better. Why? It proves you suspected unauthorized activity before discovering the paperwork. He underlined something. If this ever reaches court, timing matters. Everything mattered now. The dates, the phone logs, the bank records. Even my hesitation. Nothing was random anymore. Ryan reached for another folder. I need you to do something difficult. What? Write everything. I already told you. No. He shook his head gently. I need you to write it yourself. He slid a blank notebook toward me. every memory connected to money. I stared at the empty page. Everyone? Everyone. So I started. Age 16. The electric bill. My school trip. $211. Age 19. Community college. Dad's truck repairs. Age 22. Lily's college apartment deposit. Age 24. Her braces. Age 26. Their overdue property taxes. Age 28. Medical bills. Age 30. Credit card balances. Vacation deposits. Roof repairs. Insurance deductibles. The list kept growing. So did my disbelief. Page after page. Year after year. Payment after payment. Some were loans. Some were gifts. None were ever repaid. Most weren't even acknowledged afterward. Ryan quietly totaled the numbers on his calculator while I continued writing. Eventually, he turned the screen toward me. 186,420. I blinked. That can't be right. It is. I've given them almost $200,000. Actually, more. What do you mean? This only includes what you documented. He tapped the notebook. There are probably dozens you've forgotten. I leaned back in my chair. Nearly $200,000. Enough to buy a house, enough to retire debt, enough to build a future. Instead, it had disappeared. And somehow, I was still expected to give more. Ryan stood and walked toward the office window. You know what's interesting? What? They never asked you to invest. I frowned. What do you mean? They never offered ownership. I hadn't thought about that. When they borrowed money, they promised to pay it back, but never did. When they needed help, they said family helps family. When you succeeded, they congratulated themselves. I slowly nodded. They've never treated you like a partner. No. They've treated you like infrastructure. The word settled deep inside me. Infrastructure. Something everyone depends on. Something nobody notices until it stops working. That had been my role. Not daughter. Infrastructure. Ryan returned to the desk. I think the wedding is only half the story. I agree. We're still missing the reason. The missing money. Exactly. The second mortgage explained part of it. But not $90,000. Something larger had happened. Something expensive. Something hidden. Ryan opened his laptop. We're not guessing. We're proving. The next morning, my phone began ringing. Not my parents. Other relatives. My Aunt Denise called first. Honey, your mother is devastated. I stayed quiet. She's crying herself sick. I'm sorry she's upset. Surely you can work something out. I already offered a wedding gift. But family, there it is. What? The word family. Silence. You only call when someone wants money. She sounded offended. I called because I care. When was the last time you asked how my business was doing? No answer. When was the last time you visited my office? Silence again. When was the last time you invited me to dinner without asking for something? She quietly ended the call. The second call came 30 minutes later. Then another. By evening, I'd received 9 phone calls, 4 text messages, 3 Facebook messages, 1 voicemail from our former pastor. Every conversation sounded strangely similar, almost rehearsed. They all used the same phrases. Family sticks together. You only get one family. Money isn't everything. It would mean so much. Nobody mentioned $90,000. Nobody mentioned loans. Nobody mentioned fraud. Just family. Always family. Ryan listened to one voicemail before looking at me thoughtfully. They're coordinated. I know. This isn't spontaneous. No. They're following instructions. The realization chilled me. My mother hadn't simply complained. She'd launched a campaign. Late Sunday evening, while deleting another guilt-filled voicemail, something occurred to me. Everyone kept talking about the wedding, but nobody mentioned a wedding date. I opened my notebook again. Engagement announcement. 3 weeks ago. Venue? Unknown. Invitations? Not mailed. Guest list? Not finalized. Dress? Still being altered. Flowers? Not ordered. Photographer? No deposit. So why the rush? Real weddings require months. Sometimes a year. This one seemed built around one deadline. Not the ceremony. The money. I wrote another question across the top of a clean page. Why must everything happen before the wedding? Ryan looked over my shoulder. That's the right question. Is it? Yes. Why? Because deadlines reveal motives. He smiled faintly. Courts know that. So do accountants. I smiled for the first time all weekend. Maybe because I wasn't facing this alone anymore. Maybe because someone finally believed me without asking me to apologize first. Either way, the fear had started turning into determination. And somewhere across town, my parents still believed I was slowly giving in. They had no idea I was building something far more dangerous than an argument. I was building evidence. Monday morning arrived with the kind of quiet that usually made me productive. Instead, every sound seemed amplified. The ticking clock above my office door. The humming printer warming up. The coffee machine sputtering in the corner. Everything felt normal. Nothing was. Ryan had already left for court before sunrise, but not before leaving a handwritten note beside my coffee mug. Don't react, document. It was exactly the advice an attorney would give. And exactly the advice my younger self never would have followed. For years I'd reacted. I'd apologized. I'd explained. I'd defended myself against accusations that should never have existed. Now I had something stronger than explanations. I had facts. By 9 o'clock, my assistant Emma noticed something was wrong. You've read the same email 3 times. I smiled weakly. I'm distracted. Wedding stress? I almost laughed. If only. Emma had worked with me for almost 4 years. She'd watched clients come and go. She'd seen me balance impossible books. She'd also noticed something I hadn't. Your family only seems to visit during tax season. I looked up. What makes you say that? They never stop by to bring lunch. She shrugged. They only show up when paperwork is involved. I stared at her. Sometimes the people standing outside your life see the pattern long before you do. Around noon, my father called again. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. Morning, sweetheart. Hi, Dad. I've been thinking. So have I. I'm glad. A pause. I don't like how tense things have become. Neither do I. So let's fix it. There it was again. Fix it. Always my responsibility. Never theirs. I'd like that. Good. We'll all sit down Friday. I'll be there. And we'll sign a few things. I nearly smiled. He'd said the quiet part out loud. What things? Oh, nothing major. His tone became almost playful. Just paperwork. What paperwork? You know. He hesitated. Family paperwork. There was no such thing. Families celebrate birthdays. They exchange recipes. They argue about politics. Healthy families don't require legal paperwork to prove love. I'll read everything first. Silence. Then a forced chuckle. Of course. You've always been careful. Exactly. And this time, being careful was going to save me. That afternoon, Ryan stopped by my office carrying a sealed envelope. I have something. What is it? My investigator found public records. I blinked. You hired an investigator? I hired someone to verify facts. He placed several printed documents on my desk. Property records, mortgage filings, business registrations, corporate searches. Most were ordinary. One wasn't. My father's consulting business had been registered only 5 weeks earlier. 5 weeks. The timing lined up almost perfectly with Lily's engagement. He didn't start a business. Ryan nodded. He started paperwork. The company had no employees, no contracts, no clients, no income history, nothing. Just registration documents. A shell. A company created right before requesting $90,000. I slowly leaned back. This wasn't desperation. No, this was planning. Exactly. Every piece fit together more neatly. Wedding, investment, loan, new business. Everything started within weeks of each other. Not coincidence. Strategy. That evening, Lily surprised me. She knocked on my office door just before closing. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Mascara smudged. Still wearing bridal magazines tucked under one arm. I need help. Come in. She sat without speaking. for almost a full minute, then whispered, "I don't think anyone has paid for anything." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "The venue keeps asking for deposits. The florist, too. The photographer. The caterer." She swallowed hard. "Mom keeps saying you've got everything under control?" I stayed quiet. "I thought you were handling it." "I never agreed to." Her eyes widened. "What?" I told Mom no. "When?" "3 weeks ago." Color drained from her face. "Then who's paying?" The question hung between us. It was the same question Ryan and I had been asking. Nobody knew, not even the bride. I chose my words carefully. "Lily, please, has Dad shown you the wedding budget?" She slowly shook her head. "No." "Has Ethan seen it?" "I don't think so." "Has anyone?" Another silence. "I guess," she whispered. I never asked. There it was. The entire family had accepted promises instead of proof. Because believing was easier than asking. I reached across my desk. "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't sign anything." She frowned. "I'm not signing anything." "You might." "Why would I?" "Just promise me." She searched my face. "Finally. I promise." It wasn't everything, but it was something. After she left, Ryan arrived. "How did it go?" "She doesn't know," I figured. "She thinks the wedding is fully funded." "It isn't." "No." She asked who was paying. Ryan looked thoughtful. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." "Which was?" I told her I wasn't. He nodded approvingly. "Good." I looked toward the window. "I almost told her everything." "I know." "But you didn't." "No." "That took discipline. I don't want to destroy her." Ryan sat beside me. "You're not." He spoke gently. "Truth doesn't destroy people. Lies do." Wednesday afternoon, another surprise arrived. This time it was Ethan. He called asking if we could meet privately. We chose a small coffee shop outside town, away from curious eyes. He looked nervous from the moment he sat down. "I hope this isn't awkward." "It doesn't have to be." He stirred his coffee without drinking it. "My dad wants to invest with your father." "I've heard." I asked to review the financial statements. "And?" "They keep delaying." He sighed. "They always have another excuse." I listened. "I work in finance." He smiled awkwardly. "Not accounting?" "But enough to recognize when people avoid numbers." That impressed me. Most people ignored warning signs. He was paying attention. "I think something's wrong," he finally admitted. "I just don't know what." I studied him carefully. He loved Lily. That much was obvious. He wasn't looking for gossip. He was looking for truth. "I can't tell you everything." "I understand. But I can tell you one thing." He leaned forward. "Tell your father not to invest until next week." He blinked. "That's oddly specific." "I know. Can you tell me why?" "Not yet." He held my gaze, then quietly nodded. "I trust you." The words almost broke my heart, because trust had become such a rare thing in my own family. As we stood to leave, Ethan hesitated. "Can I ask one personal question?" "Sure." "Why are you helping me?" I smiled sadly. "Because someone should." He thanked me, then walked away. Watching him leave, I realized something important. Not everyone connected to my family was like my family. Some people still valued honesty more than appearances. I hoped Ethan kept that part of himself. He was going to need it. That night, Ryan and I reviewed every document one final time. The evidence folder had grown thick. Phone records, property records, banknotes, photographs, timelines, loan applications, credit freezes, 16 years of financial ledgers. Ryan stacked everything neatly inside a leather portfolio. "If Friday goes badly..." "When?" He smiled. "When Friday goes badly," he corrected. "We're ready." I looked around our quiet kitchen. "So this is really happening." "It is. My parents actually believe I'll sign. They're counting on history." "And history?" He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "History doesn't control people. It teaches them." For the first time since this nightmare began, I believed him. Friday was coming. My family thought they were preparing the perfect trap. What they didn't realize was that the woman walking into their dining room wasn't the frightened daughter who once handed over her savings to keep the lights on. She was an experienced business owner, an accountant who had kept every receipt, and the wife of an attorney who had spent his career dismantling contracts built on lies. The dinner they had planned as my surrender was about to become their reckoning. Thursday morning arrived with an unusual sense of calm, not because the situation had improved, because uncertainty had disappeared. For weeks I had wondered what my parents were planning. Now I knew. The only thing left was watching them carry it out. I opened my office at 8 sharp, answered client emails, balanced payroll accounts, and met with 2 small business owners who needed quarterly reports. Neither of them knew. They were sitting across from a woman whose own family had tried to use her identity to secure a $90,000 loan. Oddly enough, working helped. Numbers behaved exactly the way they always had. Assets matched liabilities. Expenses told honest stories. Receipts remembered everything. People rarely did. Around lunchtime, Ryan stopped by with sandwiches and a small envelope. A backup plan. Inside the envelope was a neatly folded letter on his law firm's official stationery. At the top was my name. Below it, several short paragraphs. Clear, professional, direct. It stated that I had never authorized anyone to use my personal information for any financial obligation. It informed any lender that I disputed every document bearing my name without my signature. It formally requested preservation of all records connected to the loan application. At the bottom sat Ryan's signature. Simple, powerful, permanent. If they push tomorrow, he said, this goes straight to the bank. I carefully placed it inside my folder. I hope we don't need it. I hope so too. But hope isn't a strategy. I smiled. No, it's not. That afternoon, my mother called. Her voice sounded lighter than it had in weeks. Almost cheerful. Sweetheart. Hi, Mom. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. So am I. I knew everything would work out. She sounded relieved. Certain. Victorious. I've been cooking all day. I'm sure it'll be wonderful. Your father even bought that apple pie you love. Funny. Growing up, we almost never had pie unless guests were visiting. Hospitality had always been easier than affection. Oh, she added casually, I invited a few people. I already knew that wasn't true. She wasn't informing me. She was testing my reaction. Really? Just people who care about this family. I kept my voice perfectly even. That's nice. She seemed almost disappointed that I hadn't argued. Everyone just wants peace. So do I. We'll put all these misunderstandings behind us. Tomorrow. Exactly. We ended the call politely. The moment I hung up, Ryan looked over from the kitchen table. She thinks she's winning. I know. That's dangerous. No. I smiled. It's useful. That evening, we organized everything one final time. 3 identical folders. One for me, one for Ryan, one sealed copy that would remain locked in our office safe. Every document arranged chronologically. Loan application, photographs, phone records, credit freeze confirmations, property filings, business registration, 16 years of payment records. Ryan handed me the thick binder. This isn't about proving you're generous. I know. It's about proving the pattern. That word again, pattern. Courts loved patterns. Accountants loved patterns. Patterns separated accidents from intent. When forgotten payment meant nothing, 16 years meant everything. Before bed, I wandered into our small spare bedroom. Most people would have called it an office. To me, it was something else. Peace. Shelves filled with old journals, tax manuals, family photo albums, boxes labeled by year. I'd spent my whole adult life preserving records. Maybe because somewhere inside I'd always known memory wasn't enough. I pulled down one dusty photo album. The first picture showed 16-year-old me wearing my grocery store uniform. Dad stood beside me smiling proudly. Mom hugged my shoulders. The caption beneath the photo read, "Our hardworking girl." I stared at it for a long time. Not because of the picture, because I finally understood it. They hadn't praised who I was. They'd praised what I provided. There was another photo. My community college graduation. Everyone smiling. Another, the ribbon-cutting ceremony when I opened my bookkeeping office. Mom stood front and center. Dad had his arm around my shoulders. Looking at those photographs now, something strange happened. For years, I'd believed they represented happy memories. Now they looked like annual reports. Every milestone marked another increase in my earning potential. Another reason to depend on me. Another investment paying dividends. The realization hurt, but it also freed me. Because once you see a pattern clearly, you can't pretend it isn't there anymore. Ryan found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by photo albums. "You okay?" "I think so." He sat beside me. I showed him the pictures. "They look happy." "They do." "Were they?" I thought about that carefully. "I don't know." He waited. "I think they loved having someone dependable." "That's different." "Very." I closed the album. "I've spent years trying to figure out whether they loved me." Ryan gently took my hand. "Wrong question." "What do you mean?" "The better question is," he smiled kindly, "did they love you in a way that made you feel safe?" The answer came immediately. No. And that's the only answer that matters. Friday morning dawned bright and warm. The kind of summer day that made neighborhoods look peaceful. Birds chirped. Children rode bicycles. Neighbors watered flowers. Nothing about the world suggested. My family was preparing an ambush. Disguised as dinner, I dressed more carefully than usual. Not to impress anyone. To remind myself who I had become. A navy blue dress. Simple pearl earrings. Comfortable shoes. Professional. Confident. No armor. Just dignity. Ryan adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. "The expensive suit?" I smiled. "You remembered." "I remember everything." He kissed my forehead. "Ready?" I took a slow breath. "No." He nodded. "Good." I blinked. "Good?" People who think they're completely ready usually stop paying attention. He picked up the leather portfolio. "I'd rather you stay observant." We drove separately exactly as planned. I would arrive first. Ryan would wait nearby. If the evening stayed civil, wonderful. If it became what we expected, he would come in. No surprises. No shouting. Just truth. As my parents' neighborhood came into view, memories flooded back. Learning to ride my bike. Walking to school. Selling lemonade in front of the house. Waiting for Dad to come home from work. Life had once felt so simple here. Funny how adulthood changes the meaning of familiar streets. I turned onto Maple Drive and immediately noticed something unusual. 3 unfamiliar luxury sedans lined the curb. Black, silver, dark blue, none belonged to neighbors. All parked neatly in front of my parents' house. Exactly where guests would park. I slowed the car. So Mom had lied. Again. Just family. Not even close. I pulled over 1 block away. Before getting out, I sent Ryan a text. 3 extra cars, definitely not just family. His reply appeared within seconds. "I see them. Stay calm. I'm 5 minutes away." I smiled. Not because I felt brave. Because for the first time in my life, someone was standing beside me instead of behind me. I walked slowly toward the house. Every step felt strangely light. The porch looked exactly the way it always had. Fresh flowers. Polished brass door handle. The old wind chime Dad bought 30 years ago. Home looked unchanged. People often mistake familiar places for safe ones. They're not always the same thing. I rang the bell. Mom opened it almost immediately. She wore her nicest burgundy dress. The one reserved for weddings, church holidays, and funerals. Appropriate, I thought. Tonight might contain all 3. "There you are." She hugged me warmly. Too warmly. The performance had already begun. "I'm so happy you came." "So am I." She stepped aside. As I entered, the smell of pot roast filled the house. Exactly as promised. The dining room glowed beneath soft yellow lights. The table was beautifully arranged. Fine china, crystal glasses, fresh flowers. Everything looked perfect. Then I noticed the briefcases. 3 of them, open, resting beside stacks of neatly organized documents. 3 unfamiliar men in tailored suits looked up simultaneously. each wearing the polite smile of professionals expecting an uncomplicated evening. They had no idea. Mom followed my gaze. "Oh, don't worry about them." She laughed lightly. "They're just friends helping us finish a few family details." Family details. That was one way to describe a $90,000 trap. I smiled politely. Of course. Inside my purse rested 16 years of receipts. Outside, only a few houses away, my husband waited with the truth. And somewhere deep inside me, the frightened 16-year-old, who once believed love had to be earned, quietly stepped aside. It was finally time for the woman she had become to take her seat. I followed my mother into the dining room, smiling politely while my mind quietly counted every person in the room. Mom, Dad, Lily, Ethan, 3 attorneys, 7 people, 7 witnesses. Exactly. The kind of audience my mother loved whenever she believed she was about to win. "Sit here, sweetheart," she said, pulling out the chair at the end of the table. The good chair. The same chair where holiday toasts were made. The same chair where family announcements happened. Tonight it had become something else. A witness stand. I thanked her and sat down. Dad poured iced tea into everyone's glasses without looking directly at me. His smile looked practiced. Too careful. He wasn't relaxed. He was waiting. Across from me, Lily kept twisting her engagement ring around her finger. Again. And again. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrified. Ethan noticed me watching and gave the smallest nod. I understood immediately. He'd spoken to his father. The investment hadn't happened yet. One innocent family was still safe. That mattered. More than anyone else in the room realized. Dinner began almost normally. Mom complimented the roast. Dad joked about baseball. One attorney talked about the weather. Another admired the neighborhood. Everyone pretended this was simply a family gathering. Nobody mentioned paperwork. Not yet. I played my part too. I complimented the potatoes. Asked Ethan about work. Smiled when appropriate. For 20 long minutes, we acted like strangers performing someone else's family. Finally, Mom set down her fork. The room became noticeably quieter. "There are a few things we should take care of." There it was. The opening line. One attorney immediately reached into his briefcase. He removed a thick stack of papers neatly clipped together. Without saying a word, he slid them across the polished table until they stopped directly in front of me. Beside them, my mother gently placed a familiar gold fountain pen. The same pen she'd used to sign Christmas cards every December. The same pen she'd proudly called her lucky pen. Tonight it pointed toward me like an accusation. "Nothing complicated," she said warmly. "Just paperwork." I didn't touch it. Instead, I adjusted my glasses and began reading. That single decision visibly unsettled everyone. Dad shifted in his chair. Mom smiled a little tighter. One attorney glanced toward another. They hadn't expected me to read. They had expected emotion, trust, pressure, not patience. Page 1 looked harmless. Family partnership agreement. Page 2 described cooperation. Page 3 discussed shared responsibilities. Then came page 9. Exactly where Ryan predicted. Buried beneath dense legal language sat one sentence. Joint financial obligations incurred by family. Ventures shall be guaranteed equally by all participating members. Another paragraph defined family ventures broadly enough to include future loans. Another pledged personal assets as collateral. Another authorized financial responsibility extending indefinitely. Simple wording. Massive consequences. This wasn't a wedding contribution. This was financial captivity. Legally written. Professionally prepared. Carefully hidden beneath pages nobody expected me to read. I closed the document. Very gently. Very carefully. Then folded my hands. Silence filled the dining room. Finally, Mom spoke. "So?" I looked directly at her. "What exactly am I signing?" Her smile flickered. "You just read it. I'd like to hear you explain it." One attorney cleared his throat. "It's simply an agreement formalizing family support." I turned toward him. "Does it make me responsible for existing and future debt?" His smile disappeared. "It provides yes or no?" He hesitated. "Yes." I nodded once. "Thank you." Mom quickly interrupted. Don't make this sound worse than it is. I'm asking questions. You're overthinking. Dad finally joined in. Sweetheart, we've always trusted each other. Have we? I almost asked. Instead, I kept reading. Another paragraph referenced existing financing. Another referenced guarantees. Another referenced obligations already initiated. Already initiated. The loan. Everything connected. Exactly as Ryan suspected. Mom pushed the gold pen a little closer. We need this signed tonight. Why tonight? The wedding? No. I looked at her calmly. Why tonight? Her eyes narrowed. Because the timeline matters. What timeline? The vendors. Which vendors? No answer. I turned toward Dad. What date is the wedding deposit due? Silence. He looked toward Mom. Wrong move. He should have known. Accountants notice hesitation. He began. Don't remember the exact date. Interesting. Parents funding a $50,000 wedding. Who couldn't remember the payment schedule. I looked toward Lily. When is your venue deposit due? She blinked. I don't know. Your florist? She looked confused. Mom handles that. Exactly. Nobody knew anything. Because there was never anything to know. The wedding wasn't the project. The loan was. One attorney tried steering the conversation back. Perhaps we're getting distracted. No. I smiled politely. I think we're finally discussing the correct subject. He looked uncertain. Professionals dislike surprises. Especially legal ones. Mom's voice hardened. Faith. She only used my full name when she wanted obedience. We've bent over backward for this family. I stayed quiet. Your father has worked his whole life. Quiet. We sacrificed everything. Still quiet. We never asked you for much. That almost made me laugh. Instead, I simply asked, should I bring in my records? Nobody spoke. I've kept every financial record since I was 16. Dad's face changed. Only slightly. But enough. He hadn't known. Mom recovered first. We're not talking about the past. I think we are. This is about Lily. No. I shook my head. It's about patterns. The word landed heavily. Patterns. The one thing manipulators hate. Because patterns remove excuses. One mistake is forgivable. 20 years become evidence. The lead attorney slowly leaned forward. Miss Sinclair, Mrs. Hartley. The correction escaped before I could stop it. The room froze. Every face turned toward me. Mom blinked. What? I smiled softly. You called me Miss Sinclair? I'm Mrs. Hartley. No one moved. No one breathed. Lily stared openly. Dad looked confused. One attorney lowered his pen. Mom's lips parted. What are you talking about? I got married. Silence. When? Last year. Dad whispered. To who? I reached into my purse. Not for documents. Not for evidence. For my phone. I opened one photograph. Ryan and I standing outside the courthouse. Smiling. Holding hands. Just us. No decorations. No audience. No performance. I quietly placed the picture on the table. Mom picked it up. Her face lost every trace of color. You hid this. Yes. From your own family? I did. Why? I looked around the beautifully decorated dining room. The expensive attorneys. The hidden contracts. The waiting pen. The carefully planned ambush. Then I answered honestly, because I didn't trust you. The words echoed through the room. Nobody interrupted. Nobody argued. Because everyone knew. I had just told the truth. Mom slowly placed the photograph back on the table. Where is he? Nearby. Dad looked toward the windows. As in, I nodded. Close. Mom's voice became dangerously quiet. You brought your husband? I did. You planned this. I met her eyes. No. I answered gently. You did. Then, very calmly, I unlocked my phone beneath the table, opened my messages, typed one word. Now. I pressed send. Somewhere outside, Ryan's phone vibrated. 30 seconds later, the front doorbell rang. No one moved. Mom stared toward the hallway. Dad looked confused. The attorneys exchanged uncertain glances. Lily looked frightened. Ethan quietly sat back in his chair as if he'd been expecting this moment all along. The bell rang again. I slowly stood. I'll get it. No one stopped me, perhaps because nobody yet understood that everything had already changed. I walked through the hallway I had known since childhood. Past framed family photographs, past birthday memories, past Christmas decorations, past every reminder of the girl who had spent decades believing love had to be earned. I reached the front door, took one slow breath, turned the handle, and smiled. Ryan stood on the porch wearing the charcoal suit I'd asked him to wear. One hand held a slim leather portfolio. The other held nothing at all. He looked calm, confident, completely unafraid. I smiled wider. Perfect timing. He smiled back. I thought so. Together, we stepped toward the dining room. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into my parents' house alone. Ryan walked beside me into the dining room with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years stepping into uncomfortable conversations without ever raising his voice. The room went completely silent. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway suddenly sounded louder. Tick, tick, tick. My mother was the first to recover. She forced a smile that looked painfully expensive. "I'm sorry," she said, looking directly at Ryan. "I don't believe we've met." Ryan extended his hand politely. "Ryan Hartley." She shook it automatically. "Faith's husband." The words landed harder the second time. Dad nearly dropped his glass. Lily stared at me as though she were looking at a stranger. One of the attorneys quietly closed the folder he'd been reading. The atmosphere had changed. This was no longer a family dinner. It was becoming a legal meeting. Ryan remained standing beside my chair. "I apologize for arriving late," he said pleasantly. "Faith asked me to join once the paperwork came out." No one answered. "She sent me photographs yesterday." Dad's face immediately lost color. Ryan continued calmly. "Interesting document." One attorney shifted uncomfortably. Ryan turned a few pages, especially page 9. The attorney who drafted it immediately recognized the reference. His shoulders stiffened. Ryan gently tapped one paragraph. "This clause assigns continuing financial liability to my client." No response. "This clause pledges her business assets." Silence. "And this clause incorporates obligations connected to family ventures." He looked directly at the lead attorney. "Correct?" The attorney hesitated. "Technically?" Ryan nodded. "Technically." He closed the agreement. "So we're all reading the same document." Dad suddenly leaned forward. "You're making this sound dishonest." Ryan looked at him kindly. "I'm making it sound exactly like it's written. It's just legal wording." "I agree." Ryan smiled. "Legal wording has legal meaning." No one argued. Because they couldn't. Mom tried another approach. This family has always supported one another. Ryan looked toward me. "Faith, may I?" I nodded. He opened our folder. Inside rested 16 years of carefully organized spreadsheets. Bound, indexed, labeled. He placed the binder gently onto the dining table. "What is that?" Mom asked. "My wife's records." Dad frowned. "Records of what?" Ryan opened the first page. "Every financial contribution she has made to this family since age 16. The room became painfully quiet. Every payment, every loan, every emergency, every unpaid balance, every forgotten promise, all preserved. Ryan slowly turned another page. And another. And another. He wasn't rushing. Evidence never should. Lily leaned forward. "You kept all this?" I answered softly. "I'm an accountant. I keep everything." She looked at the pages. "I didn't know." "I know." Dad tried laughing. "Oh, come on. You can't keep score inside a family." Ryan looked up. "Interesting phrase." Dad stopped smiling. Ryan calmly asked, "How much has Faith contributed over the years?" No answer. Ryan turned the calculator toward everyone. $186,420. Lily gasped. Mom whispered, "That can't be right." "It is." Ryan slid the spreadsheets toward the attorneys. They're welcome to verify every transaction. One attorney actually started reading. Professionals trust documents more than opinions. 5 minutes later, he quietly nodded. They appear complete. Ryan smiled. They are. Mom's composure finally cracked. We never asked her to keep records. I spoke before Ryan could. You never asked me to forget them either. She stared. I wasn't keeping score. I gently touched the binder. I was keeping history. Dad suddenly stood. This is ridiculous. No, Ryan answered calmly. This is accounting. Dad pointed toward me. She wanted to help. I did. I nodded. Every single time. Ryan added. Voluntary generosity doesn't create permanent legal obligation. The lead attorney quietly agreed. Prior gifts generally don't establish continuing contractual responsibility. Ryan nodded respectfully toward him. Exactly. The momentum had shifted. Not emotionally, legally. Then Ryan reached into his portfolio. I have one more document. He removed the formal notice prepared the night before. Firm letterhead. Professional formatting. Every sentence precise. He placed it beside the partnership agreement. This serves as formal notice. He looked directly at the three attorneys. My client has never authorized the use of her identity, credit, or financial standing for any existing or future debt. He paused. Any signature obtained? Tonight, after explicit financial, threats would raise serious questions regarding coercion and undue influence. No one interrupted. Ryan wasn't threatening anyone. He was simply describing legal reality. Big difference. One attorney slowly removed his glasses. Mr. Hartley. Yes? Did your client mention another matter involving a loan application? Ryan looked at me. Then back toward him. She did. The attorney folded his hands. I believe, he chose his words carefully, we should probably discuss that before anyone signs anything. Mom immediately spoke. That has nothing to do with tonight. It has everything to do with tonight. I finally opened my own folder, removed the photographs, and carefully spread them across the table. Every page, every signature, every handwritten number, every line containing my personal information. Except one, the blank signature space. I looked directly at my father. Dad. My voice stayed calm. Would you like to explain why my social security number appears on a $90,000 loan application? I never authorized? The room froze. Completely. Nobody moved. Nobody reached for a glass. Nobody even looked away. Because everyone at that table understood the dinner had just become something entirely different. Not a negotiation. Not an argument. A reckoning. The legal notice Michael sent the following Monday changed everything. Once the bank reviewed the evidence, the fraudulent loan application was immediately frozen. My father didn't argue. He couldn't. Between the photographs, the paperwork, and Michael's detailed legal letter, there was nowhere left to hide. The $90,000 loan they had quietly built around my name disappeared before it ever reached the finish line. For the first time in my life, someone else's financial disaster remained exactly where it belonged, with the people who created it. The debt was never mine. The burden was never mine. And somehow, realizing that felt lighter than any amount of money ever could. The wedding everyone had spent weeks talking about quietly unraveled. Not because love disappeared, because the lies holding it together finally did. The extravagant country estate was canceled. The luxury caterer refunded the deposit. The imported flowers never arrived. The entire plan collapsed under its own weight. I wish I could say I celebrated. I didn't. Watching strangers lose is easy. Watching people who once tucked you into bed lose themselves is something else entirely. It wasn't victory. It was heartbreak wrapped inside relief. News travels strangely in small American towns. Nobody announces the truth. It simply appears. Someone overhears something. Someone's cousin works at the bank. Someone sees a lawyer walking into the courthouse. Within weeks, the same relatives who had flooded my phone with lectures about family loyalty became unusually quiet. Aunt Linda eventually called. Her voice sounded older somehow. Emily, I owe you an apology. I thanked her. Nothing more. There wasn't any anger left inside me. But forgiveness doesn't always rebuild trust. Sometimes it simply lets you put down the weight you've been carrying. Several other relatives reached out over the next month. Some apologized sincerely. Some avoided details completely. Some acted as though nothing had happened. I accepted each conversation for exactly what it was. Then I kept moving forward. Morgan disappeared for several weeks. I heard almost nothing. Part of me worried. Another part understood she needed space to figure out which parts of her life had been real. Almost 2 months later, my phone rang. I let it ring twice. Old habits don't disappear overnight. When I answered, it was Morgan. She sounded different. Quieter. Not defeated. Just honest. I moved. Really? I found a little apartment about 40 minutes away. She laughed softly. It isn't fancy. It doesn't have to be. I got a job too. I'm proud of you. There was a long silence before she spoke again. I've been seeing a counselor. I smiled. How's that going? She let out a nervous laugh. Hard. That's usually a good sign. Another pause. Then she whispered something I'll never forget. I'm trying to understand the difference between someone needing me and someone loving me. The words hit me harder than anything said during that terrible dinner. Because that sentence had taken me 34 years to learn. My little sister had found it in only a few months. Neither of us cried. Neither of us needed to. Sometimes healing begins with one honest sentence. Our relationship never returned to what it had been. Honestly, I'm grateful for that. The old relationship depended on pretending. The new one depended on truth. Now we talk every few weeks. Not every day. Not every holiday. But enough. Sometimes she asks for advice. Sometimes we simply talk about work. Sometimes we laugh about childhood memories that no longer hurt quite so much. There are still scars. But scars mean something survived. A few months later, I received a handwritten letter from my mother. 3 pages. I made tea before opening it. The first page sounded promising. She apologized. She admitted mistakes. She even wrote that she missed me. For a moment, I wondered if maybe this was the beginning of something new. Then I turned to page 2. By page 3, she was asking if Michael and I would consider helping refinance the second mortgage. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back inside the envelope, and quietly threw it away. Not because I hated her, because I finally believed her. Some people tell you who they are over and over again. The most compassionate thing you can do for them and for yourself is stop pretending they mean something different. Business at Carter Financial Services quietly grew. Oddly enough, people trusted me more after everything became public. Not because they enjoyed my family story, because they saw someone who practiced the same honesty she expected from everyone else. One longtime client smiled during a meeting and said, "If you could stand up to your own family for the truth, I know you'll stand up for mine." That meant more than she probably realized. One afternoon, Michael walked into my office carrying lunch. Exactly the way he had hundreds of times before. Only now, I no longer felt guilty for choosing my own life. "I have an idea," he said. "What?" "Next Friday." "Okay. We celebrate." "What are we celebrating?" He grinned. "Us." The following Friday, we drove back to the tiny diner where we'd eaten pie after our courthouse wedding. Same booth. Same waitress. She smiled when she recognized us. "What brings you two in today?" Michael looked at me. I looked back at him. Then, for the first time without fear, I answered proudly, "We're celebrating our anniversary." The waitress smiled. "Congratulations." No whisper. No hiding. No changing the subject. No pretending Michael was only a coworker. Just the truth. It felt wonderful. As we shared warm apple pie, Michael reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know." "What?" "You look different." "I do? You smile with your shoulders now." I laughed. "What does that even mean?" "It means they're finally relaxed." I hadn't realized he was right. For years, even when I smiled, some part of me was always waiting for the next emergency phone call, the next crisis, the next request, the next check. Now, silence no longer frightened me. It felt peaceful. The phone still rings sometimes, usually around birthdays, occasionally around holidays, every now and then from an unfamiliar number. Out of habit, I still let it ring twice. Then I decide, not out of guilt, not out of fear, because now the choice belongs to me. That may sound like a small thing. It isn't. Choice is freedom, and freedom is something no one can hand you. You have to claim it yourself. Looking back now, I don't regret being generous. Kindness was never my weakness. Loving people wasn't my mistake. The mistake was believing love had to be earned by constantly rescuing everyone else. Real love doesn't send invoices. It doesn't calculate interest. It doesn't demand signatures. Real family celebrates your peace instead of spending it. Closing that account didn't leave me alone. It finally gave me room to build the family I deserved. One built on honesty, respect, grace, and choice. So that's the story of how one quiet word, no, changed my entire life. One gold pen, 3 attorneys, a fraudulent $90,000 loan, and one husband who quietly reminded me that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's healthy. If you've ever felt like the family bank account, if you've ever believed your worth depended on what you could give, I hope you remember this. The strongest act of love is sometimes the boundary that protects your future. Share in the comments about the moment you finally chose yourself. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs today. And if stories about healing, family, and second chances speak to your heart, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next story. Best of luck from Heartwarming Tales.